Alright everybody, welcome back. So we're going to look at a very scary looking sequence of words here, but they're really not that bad. So Lophotrochozoa is a group we've talked about before. It's combined with like the mollusk. So it's one where you have like a lophophore or a trochophore structures. And so it's just, one of the catch-all terms. But then we're going to look at specific groups of annelids and rotifers. Okay, annelids and rotifers. Annelids you're actually probably pretty familiar with. You just don't really necessarily know their names as well, even though you should have had them in the lab at this point. So if you're keeping up with the lab stuff, you should know what an annelid is. Rotifers, though, are a little different. So let's look at those. That'd be like one little blurb at the end. But again, Phylum Annelida. You can see it here. And so annelids and mollusks are actually pretty closely related to each other, which is kind of weird to think about, because it's like, this is two kind of very different seeming organisms, but like, wait, really? They're that close? Shocking. If you've ever seen what a Nemertea is, we didn't talk about it, I cut that out, but there's some weird things. Look up, I think it's like a ribbon worm or something like that. Look up one of those videos for Nemertea, and I think it's odd. It's like a green little like creepy blob, like a pink tongue sticking out of it. It's gross. But annelids though are kind of cool and gross as well. But remember that Lophotrochozoa name? There's that trochophore larval form. Bam, they share that characteristic. Okay. And now overall, when it comes to annelids, there's a lot of changes happening with this group. There's not really a consensus on their phyla right now, the names, the rankings. So if you look in the actual textbook, you'll see something different. I've tried to keep it in line with what we use in lab right now, trying not to confuse you further. But just be aware of that. You'll see some different groups pop up in lab or in the lecture textbook, and the reason for that is there is so much debate about this, and it's changing constantly. Like if you look it up, there's like 5 different ways it could happen or something like that crazy. Like there's so much arguments, so it's completely in flux. On the bright side, if you want to get into worms and these creatures and figuring out how it fits, then you could be a superstar. Like bam, I'm the one who solved the riddle. But yeah, we're gonna do the best we can. So this is what we're gonna use for now. Just be aware that there's other things out there. So lots of debates on how this is gonna fit together. Okay, so this is kind of the more classic way of thinking about things. We're going to use a kind of a slight variation of this, but again, kind of complex. Instead of class Oligoceta and Hybridinea, it's class Cladolata, and so that's what we're going to see here. But Polycheta is going to kind of keep that. We're going to keep that too. You're not going to get too bogged down in the phyla here too much. Just kind of know the basics of what each is and the traits. And the traits are the same. It's just like how are they related to each other is what's different. Like an earthworm is still an earthworm. Like it's not like, oh wait, we thought an earthworm was this. Oh wait, never mind. It's a flying beast with a beak and jaws and, feasted upon dinosaurs back in the day. No, that's insanity. No, an earthworm's an earthworm. It's just like, how does it fit in with a leech? How does that relationship work out? Like, where do they fit in that timeline? That's what's different. That's a pretty good thing because it gives you some traits, some general traits on those basic organisms. Earthworms and leeches, you probably pretty know. The sandworms and tomb worms sound like something made up from a movie, but they're in fact real, and you can see some of their traits there. So now we have our tissue organization for this group, and this is we're not going to deviate too much from this going forward. So remember we started off with no tissues with sponges, right? And then we started to get to this blind gut idea, and now we have complete guts, and then you have a coelom, a body cavity, with a mesoderm. So ecto, endo, meso, so we're really getting something going here, really cooking. But one big difference between annelids and mollusks is the presence of the coelom, the body cavity. And they're triple blastic, which means they have all 3 tissue layers, ecto, endo, and meso. Okay, so annelids, odd group. So we're going to look at some of these and what's going on. So a lot of species, which is kind of weird because like, that's an earthworm, like, who cares? But like, no, there's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of species. Many of them probably undocumented, so like we just don't know them all. I don't have them in records. When it comes to species, a lot of things can be found and recognized as a new species, but it's not really official until it's written about in a scientific paper and like type specimens are taken and everything, measurements. So sometimes it's just people get bogged down and just don't have time to do it. So there's a lot of probably like a back catalog of things that need to be organized. And then once you factor in the molecular genetic side of things, like there's probably a lot of species waiting to be described. That's where you see it's like, oh, we have like 1 million described species, but an estimated like 10 million out there or something crazy. So like that's kind of wise. There's a lot of stuff we know probably exists. We just haven't classified it yet. But with annelids, that's how it works. They live in many different environments. So they're all over the place. And so you can find them in the deep bottom of the ocean, where not a whole lot lives, in just overall marine type environments. If you go to like a forest or a damp log, you can find, some earthworms probably crawling out of there, some worm type annelid relative. Freshwater, you can just hang out at a lake, next thing you know, leech on your face, like that's pretty terrifying. But it's possible. Never had a leech on me. I'm proud of that. Hope to keep it that way too. I don't like the idea of something like eating on my blood. I find it unnerving. It's my blood. I keep it. Anyway, so earthworms, they have bilateral symmetry, so kind of, a thing. There is definitely cephalization that has happened in this group, more collection of nerves. They're triple plastic, we talked about that before, has the 3 layers of the germ layers. They have a body cavity. That's what's kind of weird, they have a body cavity. And then they also have a closed circulatory system. So remember we talked about the mollusk. They have an open circulatory system where you have like blood just kind of just washing over organs and they like drain back out. But this has more vessels, and so it's more of a classic circulatory system like we're used to and that you're familiar with blood vessels. They can have legs, and those are called parapodia. These can be used for locomotion and sometimes other functions as well. But you can see one in the bottom left there in that picture that's got parapodia. That's what they're for. And sexual reproduction is the norm, but you can see asexual. It just depends on which one you're looking at. And so number 1 on this, so if you look on the right, bottom right, you see some pictures. Number 1 is the earthworm. The next 3 are sandworms and tube worms, and then 5 and 6 are the leeches, or examples of leech species. And so the development of this thing, you can kind of see where it starts off. It's kind of weird. So you can see that trochophore larval form clear as day. And then you're going to see how when it starts to grow, the little budding segments that come off, it just slowly gets a little taller, and it just keeps going and going and going, and it matures. And then you have the complete gut that's formed, so you can see the mouth and the anus, and all those different segments. You have a nerve cord, so you got some cool stuff happening here. So with cephalization, because you can see near the head region, near the mouth, there is a more higher density of some of those things there. Those nerves, so a ganglion refers to a collection of nerves kind of in that area. It's kind of like a larger nerve type structure. Connections of nerves happening in there. So that's kind of just how they develop. It's kind of weird. So over that form and just kind of slowly expand on out. Alright, so now we have the polychaetes. This is a mostly marine group, but you have some that are not necessarily marine. There's not really we're going to go into about here, but one thing that's kind of cool about them is they have the parapodium, and you can see that on these pictures. You can see like they have little legs coming off of them. Kind of looks like a millipede, but it's obviously not. But these can be used for movement as well as breathing. So this is kind of unusual because you don't use your arms for breathing. That'd be kind of cool, but no, not the case. So it's something that's very kind of different for this group. Sometimes they can kind of swell up and use those for like swimming, reproduction type purposes. And then so they can also see swarms of these sometimes in the oceans during like moons. So like moon phases can dictate this. So maybe it's like a full moon or something. You're gonna have a ton of these things in one area just breeding in mass. So next time you're thinking about that moonlight swim in the ocean, you may want to reconsider because you may get covered and get caught up in a polychaete marine worm mating frenzy with tons of individuals in one spot, which is kind of unnerving. They also have cephalization present, and they have eyes too, and usually, and better eyes than you will see in the leech or even the earthworm. Just lives underground, doesn't have much, but you'll see it better in those groups. Here's a picture of another type of annelid. It's called a feather duster, or it's a type of tube worm. So these are pretty interesting. If you want to check out a video of something, you can. I'm not going to include any in mine, but they're odd-looking animals. They're called feather dusters because they look like a feather duster if you've ever seen one of those in life. But now we get to earthworms. And so earthworms are a pretty interesting group. The classically called Legocata, although they are now in a, well, sometimes debated in a new class called Cladolata, based on their structure called the clitellum, which you can see is used for reproduction. And so it's actually like, kind of like the band-aid looking swelled structure in the bottom right. You can see that little sucker. You'll see one in lab too. You should have saw one in lab. But earthworms are super, super abundant, right? They live in all kinds of soil. We're just digging around, eating things. Still feed upon soil, and so they're actually pretty important for that reason. Because they can help recycle through and just important in breaking down elements in the soil and getting air into it and keeping it fresh. So I was like, oh, you want some earthworms around, like, to keep the soil fresh and solid. They also don't have parapodia, so they're more snake-like in structure, I guess. More of a streamlined body form. They don't really have as much of a, they have a head region, but it's not as prominent as some other groups. No eyes, because they live underground, so why do you need eyes if you live underground? A lot of organisms that live underground have some added features where they have either reduced vision or no vision at all. It's dark, what are you going to say, dirt? And so, not going to happen. They do have some more classic like structures we'll talk about with other organisms later, like intestines, esophagus. They have a crop and gizzard, and those are important for helping grind down the food that they're feeding upon. So that detritus, just dead stuff they feed on, they need stuff to break that down. So that's why they're good for that. But the clitellum is an important structure for them. It's also found in the leeches too, so they're kind of grouped together in that. Legocata as a subclass. And so those one study that estimated that over like a square meter, you will have over 8,000 of these things just in that area. So tons of them. High species number for these, in the thousands for sure. They actually have like 5 little hearts that are involved with beating blood throughout, and they definitely have a closed circulatory system. And so it's actually like what will happen is this clitellum structure. So after the 2 earthworms come together and exchange sperm, that clitellum structure it'll secrete a mucus cocoon, which slides all the way down that worm and then picks up eggs and stored sperm, and then allows for fertilization to take place and just baby earthworms to come out. Earthworms having babies is, I don't know, I never think about it. It's like, yeah, it's just an earthworm. It's there. They're always there. But it's like, oh wait, they have to reproduce too. Make more. What does a baby earthworm look like? Oh, I don't know. Kind of grody. My main earthworm experience has always come from fishing. I'll use them sometimes when I'd fish, which was literally the bait shops. Like, oh yeah, we got some earthworms. We're gonna catch some good stuff today. Not really. And also, this is probably before everybody's time here, but there was a game called Earthworm Jim. You can see on the top right. I never played it really, but I remember always seeing it at Blockbuster, a movie gallery to go rent games. I was like, oh, I wonder how good this is. I don't know, I didn't really seem appealing to me. I didn't really want to play as an earthworm. I don't know much about the character. I think he's long gone, probably lost in rights, because whoever company made it probably went bankrupt years ago. But yeah, it's fascinating. Taking an earthworm, making a character in a video game, man, it's a long-standing thing that I have. Alright, here's some anatomy. You probably saw this in lab, you should have anyway. Breaking down some stuff. You don't have to label this in here in lecture, but it's helpful to visualize these things, figure out what's going on. You can see some of the uniqueness with this diagram, you can see the clitellum. And then we have leeches. So these are predatory. They can be predatory, but they're overall trying to feed on other organisms. So if they're free living, they're just pure predators going around trying to eat objects. If they're parasites, they'll try and leech on and just grab sustenance off of us. So like they'll be a parasite to us, and then to other organisms they'll just flat out eat them. Generally aquatic, and so they actually have some pretty cool adaptations, as is common to see in almost any bloodsucker like this. So they usually have something to prevent a sensation, so an anesthesia, so they prevent the host from realizing they're bitten. Otherwise, the host will try and get them off of them. And they also have an anticoagulant, which is used to help prevent clotting of blood, because that would help stop the feeding and try and close the wound these things are making. So you have something to prevent the blood from clotting and prevent the host from realizing that they've been bitten, so they don't really know, and they're just losing all this blood and they have no idea. So it's pretty clever adaptations they have, and this is definitely not the only time this is a thing. This is actually very common for this type of lifestyle. They also have this kind of teeth-like structures that give rise to a Y-shaped cut that they can leave behind. And you can see that there, and so it's just kind of neat. They reproduce like earthworms do. That whole thing. They can get really big in terms of how much blood they can take in. They can take 10 times their own body weight, potentially. They get their Hirudinea name from the fact that they have an anticoagulant protein called hirudin, and that's where they get that from. And they actually use enzymes to help bore the hole along with the teeth. And some are just flat out, again, like predators, and they use their feeding structure to try and grab and attack them. That's just kind of cool. In terms of like parasite relationships, like they can bite something that has bad blood and then pass it on to a next host, but the leech themselves are fine. Like they're not really, like, oh, I'm gonna die from getting attacked by a leech. It's like, what else is the leech fed upon would be more of the concern. They're fascinating creatures. In lab last year, we actually had a feeding demonstration. We actually did an earthworm to a leech, so you could actually observe the behavior of this. So that's kind of cool. You can probably find videos of that sort of thing online if you want to see it, but it's not part of lab this year. It was okay. It was kind of cool. Much they say, it's just trying to feed. It was unusual. And so here's some medicinal leeches. So these is actually still done. It was used a long time ago, so it's been done for thousands of years. This is not used as much now, but it is still used. And so it can be useful for reconstructive type surgeries, if you want to try and reattach some body parts, get some excess tissue, or you just want to get that away. One thing you have to be careful of is with the process of removal. If you do it wrong, they'll regurgitate everything that they've taken in back into the host, which can be bad if they've taken in something elsewhere. And that's kind of gross. And so you have to be kind of careful with the removal process, like to break the seal, but not just yank the thing off. So usually there's like a fingernail, like a flat object, to try and slowly, break the seal of them latching on. I don't know if I'd ever go for this, to be perfectly honest. I just cut me open, let me bleed out, and then sew me back up again or something. Like I don't want a thing biting on me. It's kind of gross. But hey, I'm not in that situation, so maybe if I was, I'd feel differently. Who knows? But you can see the Y-shaped cut in the bottom left. So with leeches, how they move is they have two suckers, and they use this to move. So when an earthworm kind of slivers along, doing its thing, the leech moves a little differently, to where it kind of leans forward, attaches with the one sucker, and then pulls the rest of its body forward, and then reattaches, and kind of keeps moving along in that fashion. And that wraps it up for annelids. Not that much. You should know the different groups in there, main characteristics of that group, and what makes an annelid kind of an annelid, right? We don't go too much into this, so it's basics, but make sure you know them. A completely different phylum are rotifers. And so this is a small but cool group, so pretty diverse looking organisms. You can see the structures on the right. You don't have to know they're like what the protonephridium is for them. It's just an early kidney structure, but you don't have to know be able to label those. I just want you to know what a rotifer is. Alright, so this is the rotifers, and so we just saw some of their traits, and so they're very abundant, found in a variety of habitats, mostly freshwater though, a variety of lifestyles. You can have short-lived males, long-lived males, whatever. Some are all female, so they give rise to parthenogenesis, that's how they reproduce in that way. They have a corona structure that's unique for them. It helps them feed. They can have little jaw-type structures on them. A couple thousand species so far, bilateral symmetry, complete digestive tract, which is kind of unusual. You really think something like that would exist for this small little organism, but they have it. And on the right side is a cute, cuddly version of a rotifer called from Giant Microbes. It's a pretty cool little site. They have some weird small stuff in larger form, but yeah, that's all rotifers. Small but cool.